My name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the Customer Growth Expert, awarded RevTech Strategist of 2024. In this week's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about, or gives a case study of his experience of working with an organization. And it's something that many companies have challenges with their go-to-market motion, and whether it's inside sales, direct sales. And he talks about how he moved the organization from direct sales to now what it is 7 years later to 70% partner-led sales. So he talks about some of the challenges of negotiating and influencing that major change in this organization, and really how relevant it is for today's environment. My guest talks about the skill sets that's required for leaders, and also understanding and putting yourself in your customer's shoes, and the way that customer preferences have changed. So you're going to love what my guest has to say in this episode. My next guest draws on nearly 3 decades of telecoms and IT industry experience, leading sales organizations in Fortune 500 global corporations, as well as small niche vendors. He has led indirect sales teams, channel chief award for 8 years in a row, and direct sales organizations with expertise in different market segments and regions. Born and raised in Argentina, he moved to the US 20 years ago with his wife, Vanessa, and his triplet girls, now 22 years old. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Sergio Bea. Sergio, can you share one of your success stories?
I actually mapped them with a highly qualified partner, and I actually ensured that that partner would have a success win with that particular account rep on one of the accounts, that it would actually solve a problem, solve a channel, solve a challenge that they were having. And by doing it, and it was a work of, I would say, 6 to 12 months. When we finished that year, every single one of those reps had a positive interaction with a partner, where the partner solved a problem and added value, and that started trickling through the organization. And I always remember the first year, we were doing a few $1 million with the partner, and actually after I left 7 years later, almost 75% of the business in that segment was being driven by the channel, in conjunction with the sales team, right? Because this was not one or the other. So it was an interesting dynamic, and I just had to use influence and relationship building to get this done and help with that change management.
So what was the impetus to move that motion from direct to channel partnership?
Well, it was really a few things. The company was looking to address new customer segments. In that period, it was really the hyperscalers, right? I mean, now is obviously a massive market segment. But that was a big new focus for the companies, and that requires a very focused, high-touch approach. And they were also branching out into global enterprise targets, and from a profitability perspective, you just can't add salespeople left and right. It just doesn't scale. So there was a decision to actually shift some resources to address those new customer segments, and then build a channel motion that could take care of the middle and lower end of that pyramid. that was a decision, which is normally the case in hybrid models. There are a few companies that are 100% channel, which is totally fine. It always depends on what you're actually selling, what the solution is, and what the target market is. But that was the reason why we were moving to this go-to-market motion.
Do you think that because we're no longer in an environment where it's growth at all costs, you can't just add more salespeople, that actually this is a strategy that works really well going forward in the environment that we're in, with the limited and becoming more limited? We're asked to do so much more in the revenue generating with so few resources. Do you think this is the key strategy that all CROs really need to be thinking about going forward?
They absolutely need to. Think about how, and again, I'm talking about my area of expertise, which is more technology, IT, telecom, right? Every industry is different, but in that space, think about how customers consume that technology right now. They could be consuming this as a service out of a marketplace. When 20 years ago, they were knocking the door into a bar and asking if they could buy hardware to deploy on-prem. And now they're consuming that as a service hosted in the cloud. So things have changed so rapidly over the last few years, and buyers have access to different ways of consumption. There is no way, in my humble opinion, for a vendor to tackle all these motions just with a direct sales team. Even if you had the money to hire the people, how do you evolve the skill sets? A person that is used to doing a high touch sell with a customer, I can guarantee they have no idea how marketplaces work and how influencer channels work, and how the distributors now are working with the marketplaces, or they have their own marketplaces, many of them. How do you do that? I mean, it would mean that your seller has to be an expert in all go-to-market motions, and we know that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I don't see how a CRO that's not thinking of an indirect go-to-market traction, I don't know how they could scale the business.
Yeah.
Profitably.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Excellent. Excellent. So you talked about skill set and the kind of resources that we have now. So I'd like to delve into that a bit more and look at what important resources do you think, what the important skill sets, do you think are critical to the environment that we're in now?
Yeah. That is so important, and also it has changed so much over the last decade or so. So because of what I was saying before about market dynamics changing so quickly and technology changing so quickly, you can't really, of course, technical acumen and that skill set are always going to be important, and you need to know what your solution is, what challenge we're solving. That's always going to be the case. But attempting to have people that can evolve every year with everything going on, it's just not realistic. So there are some soft skills that, to me, moved on top of the list when I'm looking for my ideal team. Well, integrity to me is undisputable, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you don't have integrity, that just leads to wrong outcomes all the time. Financial acumen is something more important than ever. And it's not enough for you to know how to sell your solution. That's great. But how does that impact your customers' financials? You have to put yourself in the customer's shoes, and there goes another of the skill sets to me, soft skill sets, which is empathy. How do you put yourself in the customer's shoes, understand how they make decisions, and what financial impact they're going to get by deploying your solution? There's so much oversight on that aspect of the business, and customers expect more and more of that from the vendors, because that's the way they have to justify the investment internally. They have to put ROI analysis in front of their CIO or CTO or whoever it is that's making the decision or holds the budget. So a lot of empathy, understanding the customer's business, integrity in the way you interact with the customer or the partner. This goes for both. Collaboration and responsiveness, being there. Even if you don't have the right answer, it's okay to say, you know, I don't have what you need, or I don't know the answer right now. I'm gonna go find it for you, but I know this is important to you, and we're gonna work together. People that show up consistently and are honest and put themselves in their customer shoes are way likely to be more successful.
I think this is interesting because traditionally we would talk about skills, and we talk about, what has been their performance before in a role, and all of the things that none of those that is relevant now. And many of the skill sets that you talk about being absolutely critical going forward are implicit. They're very difficult to, it's not in a resume, in an interview.
Very difficult.
They're good at selling themselves, so how do you kind of test for those critical aspects of what you believe makes a great salesperson for your environment?
Yeah, it's a great question, Janice, and I wish I had the perfect answer for it. And by the way, past achievements and hard data points, I'm not saying we need to discard those, right? Obviously, those are important, and track record, and if you're hiring for sales, sales achievement in the past, obviously they are important. I don't think you need to replace all of that with more of soft skills, but I'm saying performance in the past does not guarantee you're going to succeed in this world. And it happened to me where I hired what they were in paper top sellers that failed because they couldn't adapt to the new ways that our customers were buying, for example. But anyways, to answer your question, I think there are a few ways to do it, and I actually think here I'm right now with Cisco. They have a wonderful process that not all companies can afford. I get that, but when you're hiring for a certain position, there's certain individuals that are part of that hiring process that focus exclusively on those soft skills. And there are people that are more prepared than me, right? To ask the right questions and to grasp those type of qualities from the candidate. So you will have interviewers that focus on the technical skill sets or more of the hard skills. And then we have a few people that are part of the interview process with that more soft skill mentality. And then we group together and collectively we balance those things. I mean, references are important. You know, nowadays you can actually, you're always a few layers away from that individual through LinkedIn. So you can, you know, picking up the phone and talking to people that might have worked with that individual really helps. And you're going to make mistakes, Janice. You have to be prepared to accept that, you know, you're going to make a bad hire here and there. It's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is, I mean, I can talk to you a bit about this in more detail later. There is a organization that's been collecting sales-specific data and assessments, all roles across, you know, 200 industry sectors. And you can benchmark that information, and it's you know, you're constantly understanding what a great salesperson is in this culture, that size of company, selling into this type of customer, you know, so you can really cross-reference like the 500 different data points, because we know that resumes, interviews, there is effective predictiveness is only about 20%. It's really poor. And actually what happens with organizations, they have so many interview processes, it takes 3 months, by which time the best person's already gone to the job, another job. So it's this race against time, and we put so much in our system to try and reduce risk. In actual fact, that system then creates the risk because of the time it takes. But you know, we've done lots of research on this, and it's really difficult, because you know, a bad sales hire can cost you not only 100,000 but millions.
Yes.
And the time and the energy and everything like that. And this is why, you know, we often ask the question to find out different techniques and to kind of really understand what's happening in the market. So it's, you know, I really appreciate you giving me that information, because we talk to large companies and small companies around this. We know that resources are key to the success, so that's why we need to focus a lot on it. But I'd like to move on to the customer side now and really understand from your perspective, what are the sales competencies that directly impact the buyers and the customers' experiences? And I know you talked about some of those soft skill competencies, but really focusing on what the buyer wants, needs to see. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I think I covered a lot of this in your previous question. I was because the skill set that I would want to acquire through that hiring process is because I expect that to be reflected with the customer, right? And like I said before, I was actually reading an incredible this is a bit old, but a study from Gartner, but it was probably about 18 months ago, that basically said that buyers in the technology space do not want to speak with a salesperson until they're pretty much ready to buy, which to me was shocking. Because one thing is, yes, they do their research, which everyone does. We do it on our daily lives when we want to buy something. But they actually wanted to, if possible, they would have won a sales-free engagement until the very last minute. So that got me thinking, why? Why would customers do that? And I honestly, I feel is because they, and I'm generalizing with this comment, but they do not get what they want and need from the seller at those early stages of the buying process. Otherwise, why wouldn't they want to talk to you? If you're helping them building the business case or comparing alternative architectures, if they see value of that, why wouldn't they want that input? The fact that they don't want it is because I feel, and again, I'm generalizing, that we're not giving them what they want. And it really got me thinking a lot about how do we help through that buying process if we cannot talk to that customer. What can I do to still influence the purchase if the customer doesn't want to talk to me, right? Which leads to another conversation that we can have. So in the end, how do you break that? The only reason a potential customer would want to listen to you is if they see value in what you have to say and what you can give them. And that comes back to, does this individual understand my business? Can they help me build the right business case? Do they have access to market information and other references that I don't know that are similar to my case that I can relate to? So if you really have that financial acumen, that empathy, that responsiveness, that collaboration, I think the customer or prospect would absolutely want to talk to you earlier on the stage. And if you break that perception and you're able to talk early on, guess what? Your competitors probably aren't. So at that point, you gain an advantage in the whole sales cycle.
I would agree with, and think your sense is absolutely right. If you don't see value, this person's going to waste my time. Why would I want to spend time with them? You know, yeah. We do that in our personal lives. We were going to do that in our business life. We're the same person, and we're making those very same decisions. So it's actually getting in and making it clear that this is going to be of value. Then, and I wonder, you know, there's a whole kind of process, but I know that you certainly mentioned that push empowerment towards the field so decisions can be made closer to the customer with agility. So explain to me what you mean by that.
I was lucky enough to work in a lot of great companies. And the larger the company, the more complex the processes are. And the more siloed you end up being. That's just the nature of the business. It's not by design. I don't think anyone would design to be complex, right? But that's what happens. And because I was able to see both extremes in a way, the complex process-oriented business versus the agile, smaller business that can make decisions quicker. I actually see, I could see firsthand the difference that it makes with the customer. So I would ask, as a CRO, I would always ask myself, okay, if I push this decision that now is centralized and requires 7 levels of approvals, if I push this closer to the field, that doesn't mean that you remove all controls, right? But let's say instead of 7 approvals, you're going to need 2. What is the risk on that, if there is any? And how is that going to improve customer experience? If the answer is it's really not, it's not really adding any risk or very little risk, and the outcome is with the customer and their experience and the agility increases, then go do it. And sometimes we are so consumed in our way of doing things for years and years and processes that we don't stop to ask those basic questions. Yeah. Why am I doing this? Why am I'm going through this particular process? Can I empower the field to make certain decisions, and you can contain that, you can put, you know, thresholds of what type of levels of approvals they can do, but I'm convinced that is going to drive a better customer experience.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
And, I would absolutely agree with you. We know that the customers have more challenges getting decisions through their own processes. And so much of the deal is about managing the deal with all these various stakeholders. The problem, I think you're right, is that within our own sales organizations, the level of complexity that we have created over the years means that customers think, oh my God, to deal with this organization, right arm doesn't know what left arm is doing. It's more, hassle than it's worth. Let me just do this on my own. Let me do this on my own, because they're not going to help me. So I think that your strategy of simplifying the internal sales processes and aligning them with what the buyer wants and needs without increasing the risk is a great way to move forward with your customer and offering them, the easiest, most simple processes, because all they see are blocks and barriers all the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is exactly the same when you're analyzing the relationship between the partners and the vendor. So when the vendor is dealing with their own go-to-market partners and channels, the first thing, or it's in the top three always, the channel's feedback to the vendor is, it needs to be easy to do business with you, and it isn't, right? So the same level of complexity we have towards our end customers, sometimes we also have it with our partners. And partners are going to work with the vendors that are easier to work with and that align with their strategy. So it's the same thing.
It would absolutely make sense if you think of like a channel partner. Their focus is not on you, the supplier. Their focus is on their customer. They want the information really quickly. They want to do that deal. They're incentivized to do that. And absolutely, even if they're getting a better deal from another supplier, they're going to work with the supplier that's going to give them what they need as quickly as possible. Yeah,
absolutely.
Understand their journey. Okay, so talk to me about implementing microsites.
Yes, so this is tied to what we're talking about before, that there are a lot of buyers in the technology space that only reach out to you when they're very, very close to making a decision. If they ever do, right? I mean, if you're a leader in the industry, and they're likely going to reach out to you because you have either a leading solution or presence in the account, so you will be included. If you're a smaller vendor, you might not even know that there's a process happening because they're doing this on their own. So if as a vendor, I cannot influence that early part of the buying process, either because they don't want to be influenced or because I don't know they're going through that process, how do I do it digitally? And one of the things that and again, this can't be generalized because every business is different, and I appreciate that. In our case, the verticalization of our customer segments, particularly on the enterprise space, was very important, because even though the solutions we were selling were similar in nature, the use case and the messaging and the type of challenge we were solving was different, whether you were in the healthcare industry, in oil and gas, or in the financial segment. So by creating microsites that actually help the customer prospect identify themselves better, we would tailor the content and we would map, to the best of our knowledge, the process they were going through in the website, in that microsite. So if you are let's say an IT senior director in a big financial institution, and you're evaluating a certain technology, you could go to our website, identify yourself in the financial industry. You would immediately land in a microsite that talks about your problems, not the general world. And within those problems, you could identify yourself as a certain persona. Are you the CFO? Are you in the finance department? Or are you in the IT department? Or are you in the operations department? And depending, if you identify yourself as that persona, then the content will be even more tailored to your role. And with use cases and customer testimonials. And of course, you would have at some point in the journey, you would have, hey, chat with me if you need any information, right? Like a soft reach out without interfering with their desire to not engage directly with the vendor.
Yeah.
That's a concept around the microsite, is really tailoring your content, your use cases, your messages to the buying persona itself.
Yeah, yeah, love it. Thank you for that. Okay, so who is your hero or shiro?
Well, my shiro is absolutely and 1,000% my wife, Vanessa. We've been together for a little bit over 30 years now. We met in college in Argentina. And we moved to the US exactly 20 years ago. And, you know, she had the same or even better career than I had at that point in Argentina. She was making huge strides in the finance world. And we had just, we just had our 3 babies. I have triplet girls. And when the girls turned 2 years old, well, when they turned 1, actually, I was offered the opportunity to move to the US and progress my career. And she didn't blink. She actually supported me. She left her career in Argentina. We, you know, came here with 3 babies and started our life in the US. And I know it was extremely hard for her. And well, that number one, that she was willing to give up everything to support me and our family. But then her tenacity and strength is what amazes me every day. 6 months in the US, she had already found a job, and she made a phenomenal career of herself in the US, working at a lot of companies, big names like Microsoft and Ultimate Software and a few other big companies. And she made her career here outside of the financial space, oddly enough, which she still loves. And she made an executive career, maybe to COO and CFO of a few companies in the US. So, you know, she's definitely my shiro.
Well, that's why I said she's my shiro as well. What an incredible woman, honestly. Triplets, are you crazy?
I know. And they're now 22 and they all just graduated from college. So
wow. I mean,
crazy.
Wonderful, crazy, but it's all together, sense of relief. Now it's your time. Fantastic.
Yep.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Sergio. I really love what you your experience, and you know, really appreciate your really perceptive insights into, you know, like, it's not just surface level, it's really lots to take away from this episode. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Sergio.
Thank you, Janice. A pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.